Hey everyone, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. Before we dive right into it, it's worth noting that you might have noticed I did release this slightly later than usual. This might happen on occasion on OTA weeks, because if Untapped does not have enough data that I can reliably give you the best decks, then I would prefer to wait just a little bit, whether it be 12 hours, 24 hours, but regardless, you'll get it at a minimum by Sunday morning or early morning Eastern Standard Time. I just want to make sure that we get enough data to give you guys the most reliable information possible. I'll be totally honest with you, I get less views doing it this way, but there's way more statistical confidence, especially after an OTA, to make sure that I do have a good sample size of data to ensure that I'm giving you the best information possible, which for me is the most important thing. I want you guys to be able to come to these videos and confidently see these decks and know that there is some statistics behind them to support the fact that they are the best decks of the week. Let's get started with deck number 10, which honestly is not running the strongest statistics, talking about statistics. Ajax has some believers out there, and that's great if you're an Ajax believer. However, at a 55% win rate and a 0.20 cube rate, it's a little on the lower side. If you love playing Toxic and you love playing Ajax, then heck, go for it, right? It's definitely still something that can get you infinite or help you climb. But as a whole, I do think there are significantly stronger decks out there that can help you climb more reliably. Regardless, Ajax still finds itself in the top 10, which might come to the surprise of some. Hey, sometimes even including myself. And then we go to someone who I think we're going to be seeing a lot of, and that's Loki. The change to Loki has been a thing of debate. Some people are debating whether or not it's better, whether or not it's worse. But one thing is for sure, it's still damn good, especially with that 3-5 stat line. Loki Bounce is one of the iterations that's not performing as hot as some of the others, but still particularly good. At a 56% win rate and a 0.25 cube rate, you're very close to having a very strong deck. Technically, we tend to look at decks that have a 0.30 and above cube rate as statistically relevant, but this here is still relatively strong. It's also a very unique package. It features cards that are not seeing much play, as in Werewolf by Night, and one of my absolute favorite in the game, which thankfully is not the last time we're going to be seeing some Copycat. But what I will say is that Loki is going to showcase itself a number of times on this top 10 list, which should illustrate to you that yes, it's damn good. And if you're watching this on the release day, you still have some time to get Loki in the Spotlight caches. In the event that you don't have him already, it's looking like he's just as relevant as ever. And that takes us to number 8, and it's, Thena's nerf is being felt slightly. We're seeing a drop off slightly in Thena play, but it's not to say that the decks aren't necessarily as good as they were before. She's still damn good. And at a 56% rate and a 0.27 cube rate, we're still not quite to that 0.30 threshold that you like to see, but still a statistically good deck. This isn't the only place you're going to see Gwenpool, by the way. Last month's Season Pass is finding itself in a high-performing deck we'll be talking about shortly, but this one here is doing pretty well. I feel like in my testing with this particular deck, I felt the nerf to Nocturne. I know there's a lot of people out there that still think Nocturne is really good, and it is for the most part. But going from a 3-5 to a 3-4, I think really did negatively impact the card. I personally can feel it. It feels less, I don't want to say exciting, but it feels less impactful to play Nocturne. Playing her into Angela Hope Summers and having that movement is beneficial for the same reason why you want to play Jeff, but Jeff won't completely scam you the way Nocturne will. One of the best pieces of advice that I was given was don't move Nocturne on turn 6. To move it a little earlier on turn 4 or 5 so that you can actually see the effect, or don't move her at all. Don't just move Nocturne for no reason, because it does have the opportunity to scam you. So just a little bit of a tidbit there. Regardless though, Thena is still doing pretty good at a 56% win rate, but not nearly as strong as she was in the past. Now this is a re-emerging deck, and it's running a relatively low cube rate, but a high win rate. So I wanted to feature it. Its game sample was a little bit on the lower end. I believe this is at like 190 games sampled, which is the lowest in the current list. Everything else was well above 250. So this one here does have lower statistical confidence, but a very high win rate, so I wanted to feature it because we have not seen much Annihilus and Sentry Cersei play in a while. And so when I saw this deck, I was like, you know what? I think the people need to see that Annihilus is still playable, because I think Annihilus has completely fallen off. People aren't playing anymore. The play rate has completely dropped off. Ever since the nerf to Sentry going from a 4-10 to a 4-8, which is what its original stat line was, by the way. Annihilus just completely fell off. It's interesting to me that, this deck is not running something like a Viper. I think Viper is really good in decks like this. You are relying on the Circe and on the Annihilus to make use of the hoods and the voids and etc. And at some point, you more generally do have either Annihilus or Circe by turn 6 to flip those negative cards over. But anyways, I wanted to showcase this deck to you because it's a bit of a new flavor. We're not seeing a lot of Annihilus nor Circe in the meta, but there is a statistically decent deck in terms of its win rate at number 7. At number 6, it is Sandman, and I think a lot of people will be happy to see that this deck has fallen off quite a bit. It's nice to see that Ultron was getting some legitimate play, and there's some creative uses of Ultron. We're still seeing some Patriot Ultron, but we don't have enough statistics around it. Win rate's going to be approximately a little lower than this anyways. But at 58% and a 0.33 cube rate, a very strong statistical deck. Not nearly as strong as it was prior, which is fascinating because you do only lose 1 power off Sandman. I think the most important factor here is that people weren't being taken by surprise anymore, right? I should also note that Nocturne's in this deck as well. So it's technically lost 2 power. It got nerfed in 2 different ways. But the Sandman nerf, right? People were getting so used to playing against Sandman that once Sandman came down, they're like, okay, it's Ultron. Can I beat Ultron? Yes or no, right? And it became that straightforward. This deck really took advantage of the surprise factor, and with that surprise factor largely gone, and with the nerfs that have been applied, suddenly the Sandman deck, while still good, make no mistake, has come down significantly from its perch near the top of the meta just a week or 2 ago. And that takes us to number 5, and I love this one. This is a fantastic performing deck, and it's Gwen Surfer, a 59% win rate, and I do not kid you when I say currently Untapped is showing a 0.61 cube rate, which is amongst the highest we've seen in the longest time. This is performing exceptionally well, and Nocturne showing that nerf don't mean nothing, because this is an incredible deck performing incredibly well right now in a decent sample size. Copycat making these lists is phenomenal. I love the Cassandra Nova. It's just a good list. I mean, this is very similar to the one that I was experimenting with on the launch of Cassandra Nova and Copycat. I unfortunately was cutting Nocturne because I'm not a Nocturne lover out there, but I really like what this deck does. In fact, the deck that I play cuts Nocturne in favor of Rogue or Red Guardian, which I like using to deal with a lot of the Zoo decks I'm seeing out there. So anyways, that's a whole other conversation. But right now, I do think this one is a solid deck, and it's really cool to see Gwenpool making its rounds and getting some work done. So Gwen Surfer doing really well into the current meta with an absolutely astonishing cube rate. I am a lover of Silver Surfer, so I always love to see that as well. Now, Wiccan is going to be in the weekend missions, and believe it or not, there is a very high-performing Wiccan deck, and it is Loki. Now, the thing is that you might be thinking, all right, Alex, we got Wiccan. Is Wiccan really carrying this list? Well, I mean, kind of. The opportunity to kind of Loki and then have that extra Wiccan power and then like play out their discounted cards with effectiveness while also having Red Hulk, right? Very early out. You could even Ultron to close out the game in addition to a Loki card. It's pretty interesting what you can do with Wiccan in terms of that late game reach. You also still have the Kitty Pryde and Athena package. Very notable, this deck does not utilize neither Quicksilver nor Domino. It just relies on using Maria Hill to get the value, Kitty Pryde to get the value, and overall, it's been a very strong performing deck. You absolutely love to see it. 59% win rate, a 0.39 cube rate, which is, almost in the top 3 in the current meta. But as you can see, Loki definitely making waves with its newest change. As we go into the top 3, what I will say is that I want to say thank you to everyone who has been subscribing. We are making steady progress towards 100K, which is absolutely crazy. I can't wait to get there, and I want to say how much I appreciate everyone who's been subscribing. And if you have not subscribed yet, consider hitting that button. It's absolutely free. It would mean the world to me. And Black Bolt, it means the world to me that Black Bolt's back too. A 60% win rate, 0.39 cube rate. It's just a good deck right now. Now, I'm calling it Black Bolt, but you also got that Darkhawk package in there. It's also notable, Spider-Ham, a very spicy addition that has been relatively recent to take out the Thanoses that have been kind of being experimented with. You might notice that Thanos has not been in this top 10. The decks just have not cracked that threshold yet, despite the buff to Mind Stone. So maybe next week we'll see Thanos crack in, but if Thanos is ever popular, Spider-Ham likes to say something about it. But overall, this deck is performing very well. It has a great balance of disruption with like the Vipers, the Hood, obviously the Korg and the Rock slide. well, and Black Bolt to some extent, and then the vertical power that can be utilized using the Darkhawk. So really like this deck a lot, and how dare I not even bring up the fact that Moon Knight is here too. There's so much disruption in this deck. It's pretty damn wild. So Black Bolt here, I should almost call it like Disruption Bolt or something, but it's performing very good. In our top two, it's a little cringe, but yes, Loki Airsham still crushing it. 60% win rate and a 5.9 cube rate. It's just good. It's just good. Like, I don't know what else to say other than, yeah, Airsham is still solid. And at the end of the day, like, my favorite card in this deck, which I've been, kind of experimenting with, I feel bad playing Airsham because it's like, yeah, people don't want to see me play Airsham. But it's the Legion. Legion's by far the most fun card in this deck. I love using Legion, and the Enchantress is a very great, solid addition for the current meta because it's shutting down a lot of the Zoo decks we're seeing out there, which continue to be excessively powerful and popular. And overall, it's just a deck that does everything. And even the changes to add additional cards to the Airsham deck, although I think very fair, have not completely destroyed the archetype. And if anything, have made it a little more, I don't know, fun because you're getting a lot more random stuff. And when you're against an Airsham player, you can now think like, hey, they don't have their blob every single time, do they? They don't have their Shang-Chi every single time, do they? So I think that the change they made was very well thought out, though I don't know if we're done quite yet. Cassandra Nova still has a great counterpoint, but Cassandra Nova is finding itself into the Airsham decks itself. And that takes us to number one. And it should be no surprise because you're thinking to yourself, Alex, you've brought up Zoo like 15 times and not shown a Zoo deck. And here it is. It is Zoo, 61%, a 0.52 cube rate. The new Zoo with Marvel Boy and Kate Bishop. It's performing exceptionally well. What surprised me about these iterations was that it's including Shauna, which original testing was showing that Shauna might have actually clogged a little too much to be great with Hawkeye. And then what happened was it became very clear that Shauna turn 3 into Marvel Boy turn 4 was actually pretty good and a really good kind of secondary play if you don't draw into your Squirrel Girl, you don't get your Nightcrawlers out and stuff like that. So statistically with Zoo, this is currently the highest performing deck, and of all win rates, this is currently Untap's highest win rate deck. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate you guys. Hit that like button if you haven't already, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.